Alright, in this episode of the MCU GRRMverse connection, it's going to be a little bit more of a clumping and lumping together of different people. Which again, I try to be distinct, but it's a fact George does usually do a pastiche, right? He'll take a little bit of this character, a little bit of that character, mix it in, and there we go, we got a new character. But I do think something's here. So let's start off strong with Thanos. Now, I'm going to do a very quick thing on Thanos. Of course, some people know Thanos pretty well, but they might be only familiar with the most latest version, which is the Infinity War Endgame Thanos, who is not Thanos. This is really not the comic book version, so I'll just go quickly through it. So, in terms of the early and middle Thanos, Thanos had a big fascination with death. Now, death is personified in the Marvel Universe as a woman. So the early stories and middle stories, like the first stories of Thanos has nothing to do with that, but in terms of the middle stories from the mid 80s to the early 90s, he became obsessed with death, and that's why he wanted the Infinity Gauntlet. He basically wanted to impress Death, and Death ordered him to get rid of half the universe, and that's what he did with the Infinity Gauntlet. Now, the connection to the GRRMverse, I think, is pretty obvious that during that time period, again, the character did change. He was obsessed with death, and that matches, of course, the Faceless Men, who are essentially a death cult, right? In the books and the show, though less in the show, they're this very kind of monastic order dedicated to death. They don't have an emotional attachment, which Thanos does, right? Thanos is very passionate about death, so it's a bit of a difference. Also, the Faceless Men take money. Thanos really is not interested in money in the usual sense. He does have money. He will do things for money, but usually he has a larger goal. So even when he is taking money or after money, it's usually not really what he's after. So that's a big difference, that the Faceless Men, use assassination as a way for income. But even that's kind of a cover that allows them to move about and do what they want to do without being discovered. But in terms of the mercenary aspect of the Faceless Men, there actually is a character in the Marvel Universe that matches this. In fact, we've actually seen him quite a few times, and that's the Hobgoblin. Again, I want to be precise. This is not the Hobgoblin probably people know in the MCU or animated version. That's actually a different version from the comic book. I'll go quickly. The first Hobgoblin was Ned Leeds. That's not the Hobgoblin they used. The Hobgoblin they used was actually this person called Massendale, and Massendale's a mercenary, and he's obsessed with money and power. But again, there's still a lot of differences. In the cartoon version, he's actually a capitalist, right? He's always thinking about being capitalist, making more money, becoming wealthy. That's a big part of the character, but in the comic books, he's a little bit more like the Faceless Men. He has a kind of code of honor, he has a code of ethics. He does care about money, but he does have a vendetta. He also has, like the Faceless Men, he has kind of double identities, because he was actually started off as the Jack-o'-lantern, right? He wasn't the Hobgoblin at first. He actually had several identities, and he is a little bit more covert, which matches the Faceless Men. Now, this is a more of a minor character, so you might have missed him, but there's Corsair, and Corsair is Cyclops' father. If you know the X-Men animated, he was featured in the Dark Phoenix storyline. And of course, that matches up the pirates we see in the GRRMverse with Euron. And of course, right, some of the other people like Asha, who is called Yara. I don't know why they changed that name. It's pretty silly. But again, there's a big difference, right? Corsair is a space pirate, right? His adventures occur in space. But if you know GRRM's other work, like Tough Voyaging, I haven't read Tough. I want to be clear, I haven't read Tough. But it's a very similar kind of thing about space travel. He also has done a lot of space sci-fi. And in terms of pirates or sailors, he's done Fever Dream. Fever Dream takes place mostly on a river and with boats. So there is a kind of linkage much deeper than people might think between Euron and the GRRMverse and the MCU version. And again, Corsair is very close to that, right? He is heroic, but he is very self-interested, right? He does care about money and gaining things. So he's not a pure noble hero like Cyclops. So there are some differences. And now to finish off, we're going to get back to Thanos, but in a weird way. There's this character called Adam Warlock. Again, there's a bigger story with him. I'm not going to go through the whole version. But essentially, Adam Warlock was created. And with him, the major part of it is that he died but he got resurrected. The reason he died is because he was going to turn into a kind of dark version of himself called the Magus. And to prevent that, he allowed himself to kill himself. And he actually worked with Thanos to do this because Thanos was afraid of the Magus taking over the universe, which would upset Death. So it was sort of like a weird love triangle or love conflict, and he was willing to help Adam Warlock kill himself. But then he resurrected himself to save the universe from Thanos. Yeah, it's a little weird and a little complicated. Now, in terms of the GRRMverse, I would assume that GRRM might be going for a thing where Jon Snow, and again, we don't know if Jon Snow will resurrect himself, but I think almost everyone agrees it's a 99% chance he's probably going to resurrect himself, but we don't know how. Now, Adam Warlock comes more or less back as himself. But there's also an interesting thing that when Adam Warlock was, quote, dead, he was never really truly dead, he was in the Soul Gem. Right? He was literally occupying an Infinity Gem, because the Infinity Gems have worlds of their own. And he was in the Soul World. Now, it's pretty obvious that because Jon is a Targaryen, I mean, that's the theory, he's Targaryen, he will probably have some access to the mystical realms, insofar as there are mystical realms in the Seven Kingdoms, right? So we may get a peek at, well, how does it work after death? Like, where are you? Or does your consciousness just disappear? What happens? So I think he's going to push together the Faceless Men with Jon and sort of do kind of weird parallel between the Thanos and Warlock story. But that's my speculation. So, all right. So we've covered Thanos and a few space pirates. So this has been the MCU GRRMverse Connections, a continuing saga. All right, thanks for listening. Please comment below. Please hit the like button. GRRM and Thrones Analyzed on the MCU GRRMverse Connections.